The officer froze the moment he saw the tattoo. Not because he recognized the symbol, but because the man wearing it was never supposed to come back. The morning sky above Calgary Police Service K-9 Training Center stretched wide and pale blue, brushed with thin clouds drifting over the foothills far beyond the city. A cool breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass across the training grounds as families, officers, and invited guests filled rows of folding chairs facing the graduation field. Patrol vehicles gleamed under the late spring sun. Banners fluttered softly. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a radio crackled with routine traffic before fading back into silence. It should have been an ordinary celebration. The kind of day officers remembered with pride. The kind of day young K-9 handlers photographed and framed. But before the ceremony ended, one forgotten secret would begin to surface from the shadows of 15 years. Inspector Liam Bennett stood near the front row reviewing the final schedule. At 58, his silver hair and weathered face carried the marks of a lifetime spent serving communities across Alberta. He had attended dozens of K-9 graduations over the years. He knew every step of the ceremony by heart. Yet this morning something felt different. He could not explain why. Perhaps it was the strange feeling that had followed him since sunrise. Or perhaps it was the quiet figure standing alone near the back fence. The man had arrived early. He spoke to no one. He carried no camera. No family accompanied him. He simply stood with his hands folded before him, watching the training field with an expression that seemed older than the years on his face. His name, according to the guest registry, was Ethan McAllister. Bennett had barely noticed him at first. Hundreds of guests passed through events like this every year. Yet something about Ethan lingered in the corner of his attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair beginning to gray at the temples. His dark jacket looked worn but carefully maintained. The kind of jacket a man kept for years because it reminded him of better days. Most striking were his eyes. Calm. Watchful. Carrying the weight of memories he never intended to share. The ceremony began. Graduating handlers guided their German Shepherd partners through the final demonstration. The audience applauded as dogs completed scent detection exercises and obedience commands with remarkable precision. Among them was Maverick, a powerful sable-coated German Shepherd nearing 2 years old. His ears stood alert. His movements were sharp and confident. Today marked the end of 18 months of intensive training. Soon he would begin active service. But as Maverick trotted across the field, something unexpected happened. Halfway through a routine command sequence, he stopped. His head turned slowly toward the spectators. His amber eyes locked onto a single person. Ethan McAllister. The dog remained perfectly still. Trainers exchanged puzzled glances. Maverick had never broken focus before. Yet now he seemed unable to look away. A ripple of uncertainty moved through the crowd. Inspector Bennett stepped forward to investigate. As he approached Ethan, he offered a polite nod and extended his hand. Ethan returned the gesture. The sleeve of his jacket shifted slightly. For only a second, a faded tattoo appeared along his forearm. Bennett saw it. His breath caught instantly. The color drained from his face. Because he had seen that symbol once before. Long ago. In a file that had been sealed for 15 years. And attached to the file was the name of a man officially listed as dead. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Around them, applause echoed across the training grounds as another handler completed a demonstration, but Inspector Liam Bennett barely heard it. His eyes remained fixed on the faded mark along Ethan McAllister's forearm. Time seemed to fold inward. 15 years vanished in an instant. Cold mornings. Long investigations. Endless reports. Faces he had spent years trying to forget. Ethan noticed the change immediately. He calmly lowered his sleeve and met Bennett's gaze. There was no surprise in his expression. No confusion. It was almost as if he had expected this moment to happen eventually. The breeze shifted across the field, carrying the scent of spruce trees from the nearby parkland beyond the facility. Somewhere overhead, a gull drifted across the bright Alberta sky. Life continued around them. Yet a quiet tension settled between the two men. "Inspector Bennett," Ethan said softly. "It has been a long time." Bennett felt a chill despite the warming spring air. He had not heard that voice in over a decade. Older now. Rougher around the edges. But unmistakably familiar. Before he could respond, a sharp whistle sounded from the training course. The crowd turned their attention toward the final graduation exercise. Maverick had been repositioned for another obedience sequence. The young German shepherd stood perfectly beside his handler, muscles poised, ears forward. Yet something was wrong. The dog was distracted. Every few seconds his attention drifted back toward Ethan. Trainers noticed it. Spectators noticed it. Even the handler seemed puzzled. Maverick had earned one of the highest evaluations in his class. His focus was legendary. His consistency nearly flawless. Yet today he behaved as though something invisible was pulling him away from the field. Bennett looked toward the dog. Ethan did the same. Neither spoke. Then, unexpectedly, Maverick broke formation again. The German shepherd stopped, lifted his head, and stared directly toward the back row of spectators. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl. Not a bark. Something quieter. Curious. Almost searching. The handler gave another command. Maverick obeyed after a brief hesitation, but the moment left a visible ripple of uncertainty among the instructors. Bennett frowned. Has he ever seen you before? Ethan shook his head. Not that I know of. The answer only deepened the mystery. Maverick was a working dog. He reacted to scent, behavior, training, and experience. Not coincidence. Bennett knew enough about K-9 units to trust that instinct. Dogs notice things people missed. Sometimes they noticed them long before humans did. The graduation ceremony continued. Certificates were prepared. Families gathered near the presentation area. Yet Bennett's attention remained divided between the strange behavior of the dog and the impossible reality standing beside him. Finally he spoke. According to every official record, you disappeared in British Columbia 15 years ago. Ethan remained silent for a moment. His eyes followed Maverick across the field. Records can be incomplete. Bennett studied him carefully. The answer revealed nothing. Yet it confirmed one thing. Ethan was not denying his identity. He was not claiming there had been a mistake. He knew exactly what Bennett remembered. Near the center of the field, Maverick completed another exercise. The crowd applauded. The dog accepted praise from his handler. But then something unexpected happened again. As the handler guided him toward the presentation area, Maverick abruptly stopped beside a display fence. His nose lifted into the air. His ears twitched. Then he turned directly toward Ethan and refused to move. A murmur spread through the audience. Trainers exchanged confused looks. Bennett watched the dog carefully. Ethan's expression changed for the first time. Something passed across his face. Recognition. Not of the dog itself, but of the behavior. As if Maverick reminded him of another German shepherd from another time. Another partner. Another chapter of a life buried long ago. Then Ethan quietly reached inside his jacket. Bennett instinctively tensed. But Ethan only withdrew a small object wrapped in worn leather. The edges were weathered by years. Protected. Preserved. Important. He stared at it for a second before closing his hand around it once more. And across the field, nearly 50 meters away, Maverick suddenly pulled against the leash, his amber eyes locked on whatever Ethan was holding. Inspector Liam Bennett could not take his eyes off the small leather-wrapped object in Ethan McAllister's hand. It was nothing remarkable at first glance. Worn edges. Cracked stitching. The kind of item someone carried for years without ever replacing. Yet something about it seemed to pull memories from places Bennett had locked away long ago. Around them, the graduation ceremony continued. Names were announced over the loudspeaker. Families applauded. Cameras flashed beneath the bright Alberta sky. But for Bennett, the cheerful sound seemed distant now, as though they belonged to another world entirely. Ethan slowly slipped the object back inside his jacket. His movements were careful, almost protective. The gesture only deepened Bennett's unease. 15 years earlier, there had been another German shepherd. Another officer. Another investigation that had changed careers and lives. Few people still remembered it. Fewer still spoke about it. Yet Bennett remembered every detail. Some cases never truly left an officer. They simply learned to sleep quietly beneath the surface. Until something woke them again. His gaze drifted toward Maverick. The young German shepherd remained unusually focused on Ethan. Even after returning to formation, the dog continued glancing toward the spectator area whenever possible. It was not disobedience. It was recognition. At least that was how it looked. And that made no sense. Ethan had already said they had never met. The dog should have had no reason to react this way. A trainer approached Maverick and gently adjusted his leash before speaking quietly to the handler. Concern showed briefly on both faces. Then the ceremony moved forward once more. Ethan watched silently. His expression revealed almost nothing. Yet Bennett noticed one detail. Whenever Maverick looked toward him, Ethan's eyes softened. Only slightly. But enough to suggest a connection he could not explain. Finally Bennett spoke again. I need answers. Ethan remained quiet for several seconds. The wind stirred across the field, lifting small Canadian flags mounted near the presentation stage. In the distance, sunlight reflected from the glass towers of downtown Calgary. The city seemed calm and ordinary. Yet Bennett felt as though he stood at the edge of something significant. You deserve some answers, Ethan said at last. Just not all of them today. Bennett frowned. Then start with one. Why are you here? Ethan looked toward Maverick. The German shepherd had just received another command and executed it perfectly. The crowd applauded. Because of him. Bennett followed his gaze. You came here for a dog? A faint smile touched Ethan's face. The first genuine expression Bennett had seen all morning. Not exactly. Before Bennett could press further, a memory surfaced unexpectedly. A rainy autumn evening. A K-9 unit. A dark highway outside Red Deer. An officer laughing beside a German shepherd with unusually bright amber eyes. Bennett felt his chest tighten. He knew those eyes. Or rather, he knew another dog who had carried the same watchful expression. The resemblance was impossible to ignore now. Across the field, Maverick completed the final obstacle in his certification course. The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause. Yet the dog immediately turned back toward Ethan once more. As if the entire exercise had merely been a distraction. Ethan noticed it too. His smile vanished. In its place came something heavier. Sadness. Memory. Perhaps even regret. You know what is strange? Ethan said quietly. Dogs remember things people forget. Bennett studied him carefully. What does that mean? Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead he looked toward the mountains barely visible on the western horizon beyond the city. When he finally spoke, his voice had become softer. 15 years ago, there was another German shepherd. His name was Atlas. Bennett froze. The name struck him like a forgotten echo. Because Atlas had belonged to the officer whose disappearance had become one of the most troubling mysteries of his career. Ethan turned his eyes back toward Maverick. The young dog was staring directly at him again. And for the first time all day, Bennett began to wonder whether Maverick's strange behavior had nothing to do with training at all. The name lingered between them like a distant bell echoing through memory. Atlas. Even after all these years, Inspector Liam Bennett remembered the dog. Most officers did not become legends. Most K-9 partners did not either. But Atlas had been different. Intelligent. Steady. The kind of German shepherd whose presence seemed to calm chaos before it even started. Bennett remembered seeing the dog work only a handful of times, yet the image remained clear. Amber eyes. Sable coat. Absolute loyalty. For years after the disappearance, people spoke about the dog almost as much as they spoke about Ethan McAllister himself. Then eventually the conversation stopped. Files were archived. Careers moved on. Life continued. Or so everyone believed. Out on the graduation field, the final certification exercises came to an end. Families gathered near the stage where badges and certificates would soon be presented. The atmosphere should have felt celebratory. Instead, Bennett felt as though every passing minute pulled him deeper into a mystery that had never truly ended. Ethan stood quietly beside the fence. His attention remained fixed on Maverick. The young German shepherd seemed equally interested in him. Several times the dog attempted to move toward the spectator area before being gently redirected by his handler. The behavior puzzled everyone watching. "Tell me about Atlas," Bennett finally said. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. The wind stirred the grass around their feet. Somewhere nearby, children laughed as families prepared for photographs. The ordinary sounds of life contrasted sharply with the weight of the conversation. "Atlas was more than a police dog," Ethan said at last. "He was my partner. My best friend. The only reason I survived more than once." Bennett nodded slowly. That much he already believed. He had seen bonds like that before. Relationships built through years of trust, training, and shared danger. The connection between a handler and a canine often ran deeper than words could explain. Ethan reached into his jacket once more. This time he carefully removed the leather-wrapped object. Bennett could finally see it clearly. It was an old canine collar. The leather had darkened with age. The metal buckle carried scratches from years of service. Time had left its marks everywhere except one small engraved plate still attached near the center. Ethan brushed his thumb gently across the worn surface. This belonged to Atlas. Bennett stared at the collar. A strange feeling settled in his chest. For a moment it felt less like evidence and more like a relic. From another life. Across the field, Maverick reacted instantly. The moment the collar appeared, his posture changed. His ears rose higher. His tail stiffened. He took 2 determined steps forward before the handler stopped him. Several trainers exchanged concerned glances. The dog was clearly responding to something. Ethan noticed. Bennett noticed. Everyone nearby noticed. "That is impossible," Bennett whispered. Ethan gave a faint nod. "I know." Maverick continued staring at the collar as though it carried a scent hidden beneath the years. A memory buried inside blood and instinct. Bennett looked back at Ethan. "What exactly are you saying?" Ethan exhaled slowly. The answer seemed difficult even for him. "A few months ago, I started looking into Atlas's family line." Bennett frowned. "Why?" Ethan watched Maverick carefully. "Because some promises take longer to keep than others." Before Bennett could respond, Ethan pointed toward the dog. "Look at his eyes." Bennett did. The resemblance suddenly became impossible to ignore. The same amber color. The same focused stare. The same calm intelligence. Similarities alone meant little. Many German shepherds shared those traits. Yet combined with everything else, the coincidence felt increasingly difficult to dismiss. Ethan's voice softened. "Maverick comes from the same bloodline." Bennett felt his heartbeat quicken. "You mean?" Ethan nodded. "Atlas was his ancestor." For a moment neither man spoke. Across the field, Maverick stood perfectly still, staring at the old collar. Then, for reasons no trainer could explain, the young German shepherd lowered his head and released a quiet whine. Not a sound of fear. Not confusion. Something that sounded remarkably close to recognition. The quiet sound from Maverick seemed to settle over the field like a drifting snowfall. It lasted only a moment, yet everyone close enough to hear it felt something unusual. The young German shepherd had completed months of rigorous training without hesitation. He had worked through distractions, noise, unfamiliar environments, and complex scent challenges. Yet now he stood motionless before an old collar that should have meant nothing to him. Inspector Liam Bennett folded his arms and watched carefully. The experienced officer trusted facts more than coincidences. Still, the scene unfolding before him challenged both. Ethan McAllister gently turned the collar in his hands. Sunlight reflected from the scratched metal plate. For years it had remained hidden from the world. Protected through long winters, countless kilometers of travel, and a life lived far from the identity he once carried. Atlas wore this every day, Ethan said quietly. even after retirement. Bennett studied the collar. The leather looked worn smooth from years of use. Then he noticed something he had missed before. Along the inner lining was a narrow stitched section that appeared slightly thicker than the rest. Almost as if something had been concealed inside. Ethan noticed where he was looking. His expression darkened. That is why I came back. Bennett felt his attention sharpen immediately. The collar. Ethan nodded. Around them, the graduation ceremony moved into the presentation phase. Families gathered near the stage. Handlers posed for photographs beside their dogs. Laughter drifted across the grounds. Yet for the two men standing beside the fence, the celebration had become secondary. 3 months ago, Ethan continued, I finally decided to examine everything Atlas left behind. He paused before speaking again. That is when I found something hidden inside the collar. Bennett's heartbeat quickened. What did you find? Ethan looked toward the distant Rocky Mountains visible beyond Calgary's western horizon. Their snow-covered peaks shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. For several seconds he seemed lost in memory. A storage chip. Bennett stared at him. A storage chip? Ethan nodded. Small. Waterproof. Carefully sealed. The words settled heavily between them. 15 years ago, digital storage devices were already common in police work. Evidence. Notes. Case files. Photographs. Yet nobody had ever mentioned finding anything inside Atlas's equipment. Ethan lowered his voice further. I did not discover it until recently because the stitching concealed it perfectly. Bennett looked back at the collar. Suddenly it no longer appeared to be a keepsake. It looked like evidence. Potentially important evidence. What was on it? Ethan's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, Maverick suddenly pulled forward again. This time the handler struggled briefly to hold him back. The dog was not aggressive. Not fearful. Simply determined. His eyes remained locked on the collar. Several trainers approached, confused by the behavior. One suggested taking Maverick away from the ceremony area to allow him to settle. Yet the moment they attempted to guide him elsewhere, the dog stopped moving entirely. Ethan watched the scene unfold. Something about Maverick's stubborn focus seemed to affect him deeply. Atlas used to do that, he murmured. Bennett glanced toward him. Do what? When he believed something mattered. A faint smile appeared before fading again. Ethan looked down at the collar resting in his hands. Then he finally answered the question Bennett had asked moments earlier. The chip contained files. Bennett waited. Ethan took a slow breath. Most of them were damaged. The inspector felt a wave of disappointment. Then Ethan added 5 quiet words that changed everything. But one file still worked. Bennett froze. The wind moved through the grass around them. Nearby, applause erupted as another graduating handler received certification. Yet Bennett barely heard it. His attention narrowed entirely to Ethan's next words. Because after 15 years of silence, a single surviving file might be enough to reopen a mystery everyone believed had ended long ago. The words hung in the air long after Ethan spoke them. One file still worked. Inspector Liam Bennett felt the weight of 15 years settle heavily on his shoulders. Cases came and went throughout a career. Some ended with answers. Others ended with paperwork. A rare few never truly ended at all. This one had followed him longer than he cared to admit. Nearby, the graduation ceremony entered its final stage. Certificates were being presented beneath a bright Alberta sky. Families smiled for photographs. Officers shook hands. Yet the celebration seemed increasingly distant from the conversation unfolding beside the fence. Ethan looked down at the old collar resting in his hands. His thumb traced the worn leather with quiet familiarity. I spent weeks trying to recover the damaged files, he said. Most of them were corrupted beyond repair. It took immense effort to even find the chip fragments, because unlike what everyone believed, Atlas didn't just survive back then, he was eliminated shortly after my disappearance to completely erase the trail. Bennett listened carefully, the revelation striking a grim chord. Ethan continued. There were photographs. Reports. Fragments of audio. Almost all unusable. He paused. Except for one recording. The breeze softened. Somewhere beyond the training grounds, traffic moved steadily along the highway. Ordinary sounds continued around them while something extraordinary slowly emerged from the past. Bennett lowered his voice. What was on the recording? Ethan hesitated. For the first time that day, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Not fear. Not doubt. The look of a man deciding whether to reopen a door that had remained closed for many years. At first I thought it was nothing important, he admitted. The file was only 47 seconds long. Bennett frowned. 47 seconds did not seem like much. Yet sometimes a single sentence could change an entire investigation. Ethan looked toward Maverick again. The young German shepherd had finally settled near the presentation area, though his attention continued drifting toward the spectator section. It was as if some invisible thread connected him to the conversation taking place. The audio quality was poor, Ethan said. Wind. Vehicle noise. Interference. Bennett waited patiently. But one section remained clear. Ethan reached into his jacket and carefully removed a folded piece of paper. The edges were creased from repeated handling. Bennett immediately understood. These were notes. A transcript. Ethan unfolded the page slowly. I listened to it hundreds of times. His voice had become almost distant now. Every night for weeks. Bennett felt his pulse quicken. Ethan read a single line from memory rather than from the paper itself. The words had clearly become impossible to forget. If anything happens, it came from inside. Silence followed. Bennett stared at him. The sentence seemed simple. Yet something about it struck him immediately. Not because of what it revealed. Because of what it implied. Then Ethan read the next line, his tone turning grim. Right after that, my voice on the tape says, Gordon Reeves, please help me, I have been ambushed. Bennett stared in shock. Gordon Reeves. But if he were pleading for his help, then he would be the very first person we eliminate from suspicion. Ethan let out a hollow, bitter laugh. Exactly. That is precisely why I didn't suspect him for years, and why the real culprit remained perfectly hidden. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. He was the one I called for aid, yet he was the architect of the trap. Bennett's mind raced, re-evaluating everything. Ethan refolded the paper slowly. But there was something else in those final seconds. Just before the recording cut out entirely, right after Atlas was silenced, there is a very specific, distinct engine roar. A mechanical rumble that doesn't belong to any standard patrol car or common vehicle. It was a vintage-modified V8 engine with a faulty exhaust rattle. A sound you couldn't forget if you tried. Bennett slowly exhaled. You think someone within the organization was involved? Ethan did not answer immediately. His silence provided all the answer necessary. Across the field, applause erupted once more as Maverick officially received certification. The handler smiled proudly while cameras flashed. Yet at that exact moment, the young German shepherd suddenly turned away from the crowd. His ears lifted. His body stiffened. Then his gaze moved past Ethan. Past Bennett. Toward a man standing near the far edge of the spectators. A man neither of them had noticed before. And for the first time all afternoon, Ethan's expression changed completely. Because he recognized him. For a brief moment, the world seemed to narrow to a single point. Ethan McAllister followed Maverick's line of sight across the graduation grounds and felt a familiar weight settle into his chest. The man standing near the far edge of the crowd appeared ordinary enough. Mid-60s. Gray jacket. Polished shoes. A visitor's badge clipped neatly to his pocket. Nothing about him would have drawn attention from anyone else. Yet Ethan knew that face immediately. 15 years had added wrinkles and silver hair, but time had not erased recognition. Inspector Liam Bennett noticed the change in Ethan's expression. You know him. It was not a question. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. The sounds of celebration continued around them. Families laughed. Cameras clicked. Handlers posed proudly beside their newly certified K9 partners. But beneath the warmth of the afternoon, another story was quietly unfolding. "His name is Gordon Reeves," Ethan finally said. Bennett searched his memory. The name sounded familiar. Not famous. Not notorious. Just familiar enough to stir something old. "Retired administrative supervisor," Ethan continued. "At least that is what most people remember." Bennett looked again toward the men standing beyond the crowd. Gordon appeared completely relaxed. He smiled politely while speaking with several guests. Nothing about his behavior suggested concern. Across the field, Maverick suddenly stood. His handler attempted to guide him toward the group photograph area, but the German Shepherd hesitated again. His attention remained locked on the distant figure. The dog's posture had changed. Alert. Focused. Watching. Bennett noticed it immediately. "The dog sees him too." Ethan nodded. Atlas used to react the same way. A chill passed through Bennett. He had heard experienced handlers describe unusual instincts before. Not magic. Not miracles. Simply observations beyond human awareness. Small changes in scent. Behavior. Tension. Details dogs often noticed first. Gordon Reeves turned slightly as he spoke with another guest. For the briefest moment, his eyes swept across the crowd. Then they landed on Ethan. The smile vanished. Only for a second. Barely. Noticeable. But Ethan saw it. Bennett saw it. And in that instant, Gordon knew exactly who was standing near the fence. His expression recovered quickly. Too quickly. He turned away and walked toward the VIP parking lot. Bennett and Ethan followed his path at a distance. As Maverick's handler tried to calm the dog, the officers and onlookers remained torn down the middle, half of them completely puzzled, wondering if the dog was just experiencing standard graduation stress or reacting to an old acquaintance. But then, Gordon reached a classic, pristine sedan parked near the edge, a vehicle that belonged to his wife, borrowed that day as a clever disguise to avoid driving his own known vehicle. The moment Gordon twisted the key, the exhaust spluttered, and the engine threw out a deep, highly characteristic, metallic V8 rumble with a distinct, rhythmic exhaust rattle. Maverick erupted into violent, relentless barking, straining wildly against his leash and snapping his jaws directly toward the vehicle. The sound was an exact match to the audio recovered from the chip. In that shattering instant, the ambiguity vanished. Everyone froze, the truth bursting into the open as the audio piece perfectly joined the physical reaction. Gordon's face went completely white. Bennett spoke quietly into his radio. Nearby officers responded immediately. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting. No panic. Just professionals moving calmly toward a conversation that could no longer be postponed. Gordon stopped near the edge of the parking area as two officers approached. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and warm pavement across the grounds. Families continued taking photographs, unaware of the deeper story unfolding nearby. Ethan remained beside the fence. He did not move closer. 15 years earlier he might have demanded answers. Today felt different. The anger had faded long ago. What remained was something heavier. A need for truth. Maverick watched every movement from nearly 40 meters away. His body remained alert, his amber eyes steady. Then something remarkable happened. As Gordon turned toward the approaching officers, the German Shepherd finally relaxed. The tension left his posture. His ears softened. Slowly, he sat beside his handler once more. Ethan noticed immediately. So did Bennett. Neither man spoke. Because both understood the same thing. Maverick's final test had never been the obstacle course, the scent challenge, or the obedience drills. Somehow, on the very day he graduated, the young German Shepherd had helped bring a forgotten truth back into the light. The sun had begun its slow descent beyond the western horizon by the time the graduation grounds finally grew quiet. Long shadows stretched across the grass. Families drifted toward their vehicles carrying certificates, photographs, and memories from a day they would never forget. Yet for Ethan McAllister, the day had become something entirely different. It had become an ending. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, a beginning as well. Inspector Liam Bennett stood beside him near the empty training field. Neither man spoke for a while. The cool Alberta air carried the scent of pine and fresh earth. Somewhere in the distance, a Canada goose called from a nearby pond. The world felt calm again. The way it often does after a storm has finally passed. The investigation would continue. Questions would still need answers. Reports would still be written. But the silence that had buried the truth for 15 years had finally been broken. That mattered. Across the field, Maverick sat beside his handler while several instructors completed final paperwork. The young German shepherd looked relaxed now. Peaceful. The tension that had followed him throughout the afternoon had vanished. Every so often his amber eyes drifted toward Ethan. Not with uncertainty. Not with curiosity. With recognition. Ethan smiled softly. "You would have liked him," he said quietly. Bennett already knew who he meant. Atlas. Some names never disappeared. They simply lived on through stories, memories, and the lives they touched. Bennett glanced toward Maverick. "I think perhaps he already does." Ethan laughed gently. It was a small sound, but it carried something absent from his voice all day. Relief. For years he had carried unanswered questions. For years he had lived with the feeling that a promise remained unfinished. Yet standing there now, he finally understood something. The promise had never belonged only to him. Atlas had carried part of it. And somehow, through a chain of events no one could have planned, Maverick had carried it the rest of the way. A trainer approached and stopped a few meters away. "Would you like a photograph?" she asked. Ethan seemed surprised by the question. The trainer smiled and pointed toward Maverick. "He has been looking at you all day." Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded. A few moments later, Maverick trotted across the field. The German shepherd stopped. Directly in front of him. For several seconds neither moved. Then Ethan slowly knelt. The old K9 collar remained folded inside his jacket. The memory of Atlas remained folded inside his heart. Maverick stepped closer and gently pressed his head against Ethan's shoulder. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. Just a quiet gesture of trust. Yet it felt like the final page of a story written across 2 generations of dogs and 15 years of waiting. The camera shutter clicked several times. Capturing a simple image. A retired officer. A newly certified German shepherd. A moment that would mean very little to strangers. Yet everything to the people who understood it. As evening settled over Calgary, Ethan rose and prepared to leave. Before he did, Inspector Bennett stepped forward and offered a formal salute. Not to a legend. Not to a ghost from an old case file. But to a fellow officer who had carried the truth through years of silence and never abandoned it. Ethan returned the gesture. Then he looked one final time toward Maverick. The young German shepherd remained standing beneath the fading light, ears forward, eyes bright. Ready for the future. Some officers wear a badge. Some carry scars. And some leave behind a legacy that refuses to disappear. Because loyalty does not end when years pass. It does not end when files are closed. And sometimes, when the world forgets, a dog remembers.